All right, here we go. This is Hawk Talk on Melrose. As advertised, we said we would be back when Iowa lands a splash in the portal, and boy, did we ever. We just landed Mark Gronowski from South Dakota State, one of the best quarterbacks in the portal. Huge pickup for Iowa. We got to, take a step back a little bit. We don't want to go too overboard, but man, you couldn't ask for just a better pickup to go into 2025, a season where schedule's pretty tough, and it kind of felt like, I don't know about next year. Now all of a sudden, you kind of have some life again because you actually have a proven quarterback, and we'll get into all the stats and all those things. But man, I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me, I think you just kind of hit on it. Like, honestly, it's just like a little bit of a sigh of relief, because if you remember when we were doing this episode, post bowl game against Missouri, we were questioning, like, where do we go from here? There was a lot of question marks specifically with the quarterback position. Is Sullivan the guy? Can we trust him to be the starter? We knew we needed to go out and get a guy, but who is that going to be? And now we have our answer. It's Mark Gronowski, South Dakota State, stud. Basically, you probably break down the stats, but the guy's thrown for 10,000 yards and 130 total touchdowns. I mean, this guy, he's really good at that. And I know it's at the FCS level, but it's that upper echelon of SCF's level that is still really, really good. So I feel excited, but also relieved that we, like you said, we got somebody finally.
Yep. There's four things for me. You got a guy that has experience. He has played a little over 3,000 snaps at South Dakota State, 55 career starts. He's played in big games. You talk playoff games, national championship games. He can throw it. You just mentioned threw for over 10,000 yards. He can run it, ran for over 1,700 yards, 37 touchdowns rushing, and 93 touchdowns passing. And then you just have a proven winner. You got a guy that's won 2 natties FCS level, a guy that's won the Walter Payton Award, which goes to the most valuable player, aka like the Heisman Award for the FCS level. You got all those things, just an all-around polished resume. And you bring it up, and it's a good point, because it's something we got to talk about is, okay, but it's FCS level. And that's where, like, a lot of people and that's the first thing they're going to say. And I can agree with that. But just because he played in the FCS level does not mean that it can't translate to this next level. And you've seen plenty of quarterbacks do it. And I think the one from this year in particular, I know it wasn't FCS, but it was still a lower level. Curtis Wark for Indiana. He played at Miami, or he played at Ohio, right? Ohio Bobcats, or was it Miami?
Ohio. It was Ohio.
Ohio. Okay.
Back. So the back.
Okay. So that's
Curtis Rourke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So lower level, not quite FCS level, but lower level. You got other guys. Look at Kurt Warner, UNI. He goes off the NFL, does an unbelievable job in the NFL. Joe Flacco. Like, there's guys out there that can take it to the next level. Just because your FCS level does not mean that you can't take it to that next level. Obviously, it's an experiment. Like, we're gonna have to wait and see. But what I'm excited about is just the polished resume, like I just said. I mean, you can't take that away from the guy.
No.
What I just said, you cannot take that away. That is what he did. And I thought 2 guys said it best. And I want to give them credit for this, for saying this, is, like they said, I'd rather take a guy that proved it at his level and wants to go up a notch than a guy that was at the highest level or maybe right below it, but wasn't good enough, so has to go down a level. Like Cade McNamara, right? He got beat out by JJ McCarthy. Clearly wasn't good enough. And so he get beat out. So now he's, he comes to Iowa. Look at Brendan Sullivan in a way, right? Like, he couldn't really be a starter at Northwestern.
We talked about that. That was your big question with Sullivan, right?
Yep. And then there's other quarterbacks too, not just ones coming to Iowa, but there's been other quarterbacks, that start out at Georgia and then they end up, at a smaller school. And so I just think they made a good point. Like, it's kind of nice finally getting a guy that, man, like, did what he needed to do at his level, and he's good enough to go to the NFL, because it literally was that. It was NFL or Iowa. It wasn't, stay at South Dakota State one more year or Iowa. No, it was NFL or Iowa. He had a draftable grade by NFL scouts. but he wanted to come to Iowa because you get to play one more year, a little bit better of a level to kind of prove like, hey, I can do it at this level. And you're coached behind, Tim Lester, who has the NFL pedigree and just knows what he's doing. And we'll get more into Tim Lester here a little bit. But yeah, I just thought that was a great point by them, taking a guy that was at a lower level and going up a notch.
Yeah, 100%. And just what I love about him, obviously dual threat guy, you just mentioned it, run, pass, and that's what, Iowa needs. And we saw flashes of that with Sullivan. And I thought that, combination in today's game is what you have to have as a quarterback. But unlike Sullivan, when he actually knows how to protect himself, this is his style of play. He's been there, done that for 4 years. And it just seems like he knows when to get down and live for the next play. And I don't know if Sullivan knows how to do that, considering he's taken some massive shots, UCLA, Missouri, and it just doesn't seem like he's the same player, and obviously UCLA got hurt and was done.
Yeah.
Missouri, mentally, I just don't think he was all there in that second half. And he just can't stay healthy. I mean, Gronowski, he's durable. He's 6'3", 230 pounds. The guy's, he's built for this. And I think that's what gives me hope. And like you just mentioned, he did it at the FCS level, at the highest level. And I believe another guy we'll talk about maybe. I know we kind of talked about it off camera. Max Brosmer, Minnesota. The guy was from New Hampshire, didn't really win anything at the FCS level, but actually came into Minnesota and was a productive quarterback this year.
Yeah, I'm going to share his stats here in a little bit.
There's examples out there that give me hope that this could work. So
yeah, exactly. And yeah, going back to Brent Sullivan, I'm not a guy that is like just out on Sullivan. I just think that like after that bowl game, and we talked about it after that, at that episode, was just like, man, like, I don't know if I can trust that he can go an entire year, just the way he constantly just goes to running the football. And you go watch Mark's highlights is, yes, he put up good rushing yards, but that was kind of his second resort. And I kept saying that, like, that's what Sullivan needs to get to. And it doesn't mean he can't get to that, but I just feel like if that's what you've always been, it's really, really hard to just naturally change that up. I mean, like, can we really trust that he gets to the point where he's pass first, then run? Because in the bowl game, you saw in the first half, it was pretty good, but then he went right back to what he was. And that's,
what he knew,
immediately just run the football. Don't scan your progressions.
First read's not there. It's take off. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So
we need to get away from that.
Yep. So speaking of Sullivan, I mean, I was going to wait till maybe later, but I thought might as well just say it now. It's like, okay, what do we do with Sullivan now? Because, he made it known before the bowl game that he's open to competition. He wants competition. That was probably a little bit just like, I know he's not a coach, but kind of like coach speak, you just kind of say those things. I mean, what are you supposed to say? Oh, no, I'm out of here.
What do you?
So it will be interesting. I do think he will stay for spring ball because you never know. But I think if we get past spring ball and it's pretty much a clear cut that Mark, he's going to be the guy. As long as he stays healthy, he's going to be the guy. I really do think Sullivan will probably leave. I mean, because he only has one more year left. Like if he had 2 more years, then I would maybe say like, oh yeah, he might stay because then he'll be the quarterback in 2026, but he only has 1 more year left. So will he really want to do that? Sit behind a guy, only come in certain times? And the thing is, you could say like, oh, he could come in certain packages, but that's the thing though. Mark can also run too. So like, you don't,
that.
Yeah. Unlike Cade, right? Because Cade can't do that. Cade couldn't do that.
Needed that other option.
Really, you don't really need Brendan in those situations going into next year, as long as, like I said, Mark stays healthy. So I do think Sullivan will probably leave. I hope he doesn't, because it's just nice to have, like, if Sullivan decided to stay, I mean, man, you talk about like, that's a pretty good quarterback room. But I just don't see him staying.
No, I don't either. If it, like you said, I could see him sticking through spring ball, and if it gets to that point where Gronowski's named the starter or it's looking like that, and guys want to play now, right? There's no more sitting around, and like you said, this is his last year, so he's going to want to probably play. And it wouldn't be shocking if he transferred. I hope, like you said, he doesn't. But the depth at that position would be insane then, which is something that we're just not used to. So
yeah, exactly. I want to turn attention now to Tim Lester, because without this man, we would not be doing this podcast right now without Tim.
True.
Got to give him a little bit of praise because in just a one short year, I know the offense is still not quite where we needed to be. And, we'll talk about that, coming up, future episodes, things like that, where the passing game, definitely not where it needs to be at. But he has done everything right so far. Lester has. And Mark had this quote right here that I'm just going to read off here. He talked about Tim Lester. He said, "It's a great coaching staff. With Coach Tim being in the NFL last year and bringing an NFL offense to Iowa, it's a great opportunity to develop as a player, learn an NFL offense, and win a lot of games." And then Elliot Clough with Rivals, he said he had a source tell him that anytime a quarterback spends extended time with Tim Lester, they leave excited about Iowa. So that just tells me, and we've talked about this a lot, Lester just brings that energy. And every time he talks to just the media, you just feel good after he gets done talking. It's just something about him. It's just good vibes. And
very likable guy.
Yeah, very likable guy. And without him, Mark would not be here. I could promise you that right now, because, he could have went off to the NFL. And if Brian Ferentz was still here, imagine if Brian Ferentz was still here, what would we have to offer Mark? At least with Lester, you can offer him, you can sell him on the idea of hey, we are running an NFL offense, a Shanahan style offense. Yes, first year wasn't great passing the football, but you could definitely tell how we took that next step, and we're going to take that next step with you. And you're going to, I have NFL connections. You're going to learn, how to run an NFL system. You have so many selling points. With Brian, if Brian was still here, what selling point do you have? You have absolutely none at all.
Pre-Lester, Cade McNamara. Obviously, he's probably going to a lesser school. Now, I don't know that to be a fact yet, but probably transferring down to a lesser school. Deacon Hill, Utah Tech. Joey Labus, Central Michigan. Marco Linez, Elon now, which was just announced the other day. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? 1 year after
I've never even heard of Elon, by the way.
I heard of it because I've seen them in NCAA tournament for basketball. Did not know they played football. Lester. 1 year of getting Lester. We've got Mark Gronowski, obviously FCS National Championship, Walter Payton Man of the Year. You just mentioned it. Brendan Sullivan, Hank Brown, Jackson Stratton, who looked decent this year in the one game that he played. Jimmy Sullivan, who's got a lot of potential as a freshman. Just, you can already see the actual really better talent come in, because
exactly
guys want to play for a guy who knows what he's doing, who's played that position and can actually develop quarterbacks, unlike Brian. So that's just what it is.
It's honestly amazing. Just forward a year, right now, January 7th, 2024, for last year at this time, our quarterback room. And then fast forward to now. If I would have told you last year at this time, hey, just give it a year. Next year at this time, we're going to have a guy that, put up insane stats, FCS level, 2-time national champion. You got another guy who could go to some other pretty, decent schools. He's a good runner. He has experience, played at a Big Ten school. Then you're going to have a guy who's a redshirt freshman, but played at Auburn, started some games for them. Then you got another guy from Colorado State. You would not believe me. No one would believe me, right? Because the state of the quarterback room was so bad. And it's there's no way. We might get one of those guys, but there's no way we get any, all 3 or 4 or whatever. And that is where we're at now. And it's awesome. And, I think we could spend a little bit of time here. The biggest thing moving forward is getting that passing game going, because last year or this past year, it wasn't great. And one of these next podcasts that we're going to do, I kind of compiled some different stats from the last few years, and really this last year, there was a little bit of improvement, but it was still about the same old in some different categories. Passing the football anyway. Obviously, rushing, it was fantastic. And when you have that good of a rusher in Caleb Johnson, I understand why, you're going to resort to that more times than not. And it's going to affect the passing game. I get that. But the passing game in general just was not very good. But I think a lot of that had to do with, you had Cade McNamara, who's just, he's just washed. He's just not good anymore. And then you got a Brendan Sullivan, who, decent quarterback, but he's just a better runner than he is a thrower. It's just that simple. He's not a good pocket passing quarterback. And so, those things, you're going to be affected by that. Also, you're going to be affected by the fact that we had a very young wide receiver core. You had Reese Van Der Zee, who literally was in high school in July. Then he gets hurt a little bit in fall camp. He barely has much practice time. Then he gets inserted. Like, yeah, you're the guy. First game of the season. Jacob Gill, he comes in summer. You have Jerry Bowie, Dane Howard. They're both freshmen going into sophomore. Like, it was a very young wide receiver core. So, yes, there was gonna be growing pains, and we kept talking about that, and we kept getting some shit from some people because we were too negative. And it's like, well, it's probably gonna be the case. It's probably gonna not be very good first year passing the football, and it ended up being that way. Now it is time to take that next step, and this is a perfect opportunity now with Mark to take that next step in the passing game to show like we are more than just running the football. It is more than just a quarterback handing it off every time. And this is a perfect opportunity now, because as we move forward, if you can have this 1 year where Mark comes in, has insane stats at South Dakota State, comes in and does really good at Iowa, then you can start selling that for future quarterbacks, and it'll be a lot easier landing guys year in and year out, or getting a guy from the high school ranks and developing that guy. So it's do or die. It really is. It's do or die this year to really get the passing game going. You got the quarterback now. You got the wide receivers. They're all going to be a year older. And then your hope is you land a transfer or two. You got some good tight ends. Like, you got a really good offensive coordinator. The time is now.
Yeah, and I was going to save it for the end, but I'll talk about it now. It's just, that's my big picture after, the news today with the signing of Mark Gronowski. I think it's the passing game just has to be better. This guy proved it that he is a very, very good quarterback at the FCS level, and he should be able to come into this system and thrive under Tim Lester. And if he doesn't, then it's never going to be better under Kirk Ferentz. Like, if you can't make it work with this guy, who's going to come in and make it work then? That's where I'm at with it. Yeah. And it sucks he only has 1 year, but because you'd love to see it have a couple years under the system and even be better in that second year. But, it is what it is. Like you just said, it's do or die. You have to be better. You cannot be towards the bottom in passing, because if you are with this guy, you're going to be with most, I feel like.
Yeah, like, when is it ever going to be different? As long as Kirk Ferentz is here anyway.
Yeah.
So, And I have full confidence in Lester. And once again, I think, last year at this time, we didn't even have Tim Lester yet, but then, most of like February, March, and even into like the spring ball and summer, like, we were questioning, will Kirk give the keys to the offense? I think it's pretty safe, besides maybe, being the guy that said, no, we're punting it on 4th down and 1 or 4th down and 2. It's pretty clear that Kirk has just kind of let Lester do his thing, right? And, get the guys that he wants. I mean, you see the quarterback room, everybody that was there previously are gone, and now it's a bunch of new players. So clearly he's kind of just letting Lester do its thing, and that's good to see. And so I trust that Lester can figure out the passing game with Mark. All right, I also want to share this. Tyler, you brought it up just before with Max Brosmer from Minnesota. You take a look, Max ended up actually having a very good year at Minnesota this year. He threw for over 2,800 passing yards. He had 18 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, 66 or close to 67% completion percentage. Pretty damn good. And the thing is he can't run the football. The reason why I bring this up is because you look at the two guys, I'm comparing their rushing yards and I'm comparing their passing. I highlighted in green who did the better job in that specific stat category. And as you can see here, Mark beat him in every single thing. Max was not a runner. He only finished with 266 total rushing yards at New Hampshire. He was there for 4 years. Meanwhile, Mark had over 1,700. And then passing, Max had 8,400 and Mark had over 10,300. And you look at the touchdowns, Max only had 68 and 25 interceptions. Mark, 93 touchdowns, 20 interceptions. So Mark going into this, kind of like the same situation. Brosmer, only 1 year, going to Big Ten from a FCS school. Mark, only 1 year, FCS school, going to the Big Ten. Stat wise, Mark is obviously clearly better. And so in my opinion, if Max can be somewhat successful at Minnesota, especially since he can't even run the football, I mean, at least with Mark, you get a little bit of, running ability. If he can be somewhat successful, I think Mark can too.
Yeah. And the stats bear that out. Like you just mentioned, it's good to see that actually, that breakdown, because you hear like, oh, can he do it? Can he not? This is an example. This is the proof that it can work. You just
Yeah,
mentioned the other examples earlier, and so it makes me feel better because it just because somebody is good at the FCS level, yeah, it doesn't always translate. But the guy, I mean, it's not like he's won and done everything you can do at the FCS level. Like, to me, that he is more than capable of taking that next step, I feel like. So
exactly. And also with Max, I think you might have mentioned this like when you brought it up like 10 minutes ago or whatever, is Max, he wasn't really that successful at New Hampshire. I mean, yeah, stat wise, pretty good. But what I mean by that is he only went to the playoffs 1 year, and the farthest he went was the second round. So you didn't really have like a proven winner, right? Like with Mark, you have a proven winner. You have a guy that has played in some big freaking games. And so I just want to kind of bring that up. And that just because, Max ended up doing decent at Minnesota doesn't mean that Mark's just automatically, oh yeah, if this is it, this has to be it too. But like you said, the reason why we're bringing this up is just to show that, hey, it can happen. Like just because you play in the FCS doesn't mean that, you're not going to translate to the Big Ten. I guess we can kind of end on maybe two more things, because a big talking point, and I've been seeing it, is, okay, would you rather have Mark or would you rather have Beau? And if people maybe listening that don't know what I'm talking about, Beau Pribula, he was a guy from Penn State who it kind of came down to Iowa and Missouri, and we all kind of felt kind of good on that one random Sunday night, and then all of a sudden he just dropped it out that he's going to Missouri, and we were all feeling kind of bad. But for me, it's like, the old saying goes, all good things, everything kind of works out at the end, right? And I really feel like in this situation, it really did, because in my opinion, I'd rather have Mark. Like, I'm just going to say that, yes, Pribula would be nice for 2 years. I get that, but you're getting a somewhat project similar to like Brendan Sullivan. I mean, how good do we know what Pribula is going to do, right? Because at Penn State, he didn't really play all that much. Clearly, he's not better than Aller, because if he was, then Penn State would be telling Aller, like, sorry, dude, we're going with Pribula next year. And so the sample size is very small. He seems like he's kind of like a runner like Sullivan. And so who would I rather take going into 2025? Who would I feel more comfortable with? Like I'm going with Mark. Like is as simple as that. I mean, I'm not just saying that just because we got him and we didn't get Beau. Yeah. The other way around, let's say we got Beau and we didn't get Mark, what would I say? No, I really seriously 100% rather have Mark than Beau.
Yeah, I mean, when before, when Mark wasn't even really in the equation, obviously we needed and wanted Beau because that's who we thought was really the only possibility. Yeah. But now that we have Mark, and not just like you said, not just because we got him. Now that I'm saying it, but even when it was a possibility, we were saying to ourselves, like, at least he's proven. Now, again, proven at the FCS level, but he's played a lot of ball, man. Pribula hasn't. He's only been in certain packages. He's only been in certain situations, maybe when Aller was hurt or, a certain package on the field. Like you said, if it's very similar vibes to Sullivan, it makes me question, since he didn't start, was he really, that good of a quarterback? So, exactly. It's a wait and see game. It's a wait and see game, right? Yep. We'll see how he does at Missouri, and Missouri's a totally different team than Iowa. So I hope, I hope he thrives and hope he does good, obviously. But
yeah. I just think with him, like I said, I feel like he's more of kind of a project guy than Mark. You get Mark for a year, and then you can kind of, okay, at that point, this is like match made in heaven. You get Mark for 1 year. And then at that point, you're developing Hank Brown, who's still very young. He's a redshirt freshman. So going into 2026, he's only going to be a junior. Your hope is then like he develops into a good quarterback and he can be your guy in 2026 and possibly 2027. Then you got Jimmy Sullivan, who is going to be a freshman this year, will probably redshirt. So then he'll go into like 2026 as a redshirt freshman. And if he's good, like, okay, like, or it could be him in 2026. So it's a good problem to have. Like, having more guys. I mean, Tim Lester said it best. He's like, I want to have like 5 or 6 guys in the quarterback room just competing, right? That's just good. And how many times during the Brian Ferentz era did it feel like we only had like 2 guys, right? We'd go into spring ball and it's like, okay, who are our quarterbacks? Okay, it's this guy who's going to be the starter no matter what. So there's no competition. And then this other guy who's never going to see the field because this other guy transferred out and now we don't have anybody. Now we have to wait for the high school kid to come in that's never going to play. Right? Like that's what it felt like for like 4 or 5 years. Now it's like, 100%. Man, we actually have like a quarterback competition. We got guys that can step up and play at any given moment, right? Like even Jackson Stratton, like if we really need him, well, okay, he's decent enough to go in there and maybe provide something for us, right? So I was gonna bring this up, but I think we might end this on this because I think this could literally be an entire episode is just talking about the outlook of the season now that we got Mark. Just like, you know, how does next season kind of look now that we got him? And I was gonna talk about this, but I think we're gonna end it there, and that will be our next episode because we did have some other portal players come in. Bryce Hawthorne from South Dakota State, obviously got Jonah Pace, Hank Brown. We're hoping to get Sammy Phillips, that wide receiver from Chattanooga. It's not a done deal yet. Sounds like he's on the verge to committing at Iowa, but it's not set in stone yet. But, you know, if we wait until maybe this weekend or something to do another episode, we'll probably have more of an idea. So with all that being said, like that's going to be our next episode. It's just like, does our outlook change? Does it not change? Because, you know, it's definitely looking more positive compared to before we got Mark.
You know, we can spend a whole nother episode on those guys. I just think it all starts with the quarterback. It's the most important position in all of sports. It seems like Iowa has gotten their guy now in Mark Gronowski, and you know, at the end of the day, dudes recruit dudes. You know, it's sort of a domino effect where maybe a guy like Sam Phillips now was maybe hesitant, like, hey, who's the quarterback?
Yep, and now he's really, like, hey, maybe.
Now he knows, right? So
exactly,
that's huge.
All right, that will do it. You guys have a good rest of your night, and go Hawks.